Hi, it's Mia Quinn, host of Sustainably Speaking. Today I'm with my colleague Stu Harris to discuss our upcoming episode with Doug Woodring of the Ocean Recovery Alliance. We're both really excited to share this episode, where we take a deep dive into solutions to keep plastics out of the ocean and in a circular economy. So before we start, Stu, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, why you're Captain Stu, just a little bit more so people can get to know you.
So Mia, thanks. And it is a pleasure to be here today, and it's a pleasure to be an office mate with you. You know, one of the reasons I got the nickname of Captain Stew is I grew up around the water, around the Chesapeake Bay, that's located just east of DC in Maryland and Virginia, and spent a lot of time out on the water as a kid. Really developed a passion for the environment and for the ocean in particular, which the bay flows into. What I'm really excited about in this episode is how Doug makes this not just about the ocean, but he connects it to the rivers and the creeks and the streams, you know, the upstream environment and the broader watershed, and how all of it comes together and all that water works its way into the ocean. And unfortunately, sometimes trash works its way into the ocean as well.
What do you mean by the upstream environment?
So when you think about it, and Doug will get into this a little bit too, which is really neat. When you think about it, oceans and rivers and bays and what have you are surrounded by land masses, and that's a watershed. And that watershed is really anytime it rains, anytime somebody runs their sprinkler, anything that happens in that watershed, it's like a big bowl or a bathtub. And the water drains down to that center point. And that center point sometimes is a little creek in your backyard. Sometimes it's a stream. Sometimes it's the ocean. But all that water works its way down rivers and creeks and bays into the ocean. And unfortunately, trash also sometimes works its way down that. So Doug really does a great job of making those connections and also telling us a little bit about, you know, how we can be part of the solution, both individually and collectively as society.
Yeah, and he talked a lot about challenges that came about because there's just like this lack of widespread recycling access and collection. Now, he's talking largely about communities outside the US, but I think it probably applies pretty universally in a lot of places. Doug lives in Hong Kong and talked a lot about that. And will you just tell us a little bit about Doug to start?
Well, first of all, Doug is an incredible ocean athlete, and he'll talk a little bit about some of the stuff that he's done. He's in the Hall of Fame. I mean, really, really just exceptional. And I think that perspective really helps him understand the importance of clean air and clean water and a clean environment if you are trying to compete at the highest level. And so really, really neat story there. Doug is the founder of the Ocean Recovery Alliance, and putting together his passion for the outdoors, his really elite athletic background with his business training positions him as, you know, a very unusual constituent in the environmental space. So instead of only approaching it from one perspective of an environmentalist, he approaches it from almost a hybrid perspective of an environmentalist plus a business person. And that has yielded tremendous results for Doug and for the Ocean Recovery Alliance. And it really is a fascinating story and one that I'm really happy to be a part of. But he also transitions it, as you said, to, you know, the importance of connecting with communities. And I think if I think about this episode, one of the most fascinating and really eye-opening aspects was that connection with community that he brought up.
I was struck by, he told us a story about a monk in Cambodia. And I want listeners to hear the story, so I won't say too much about it. But this is not anything that would have occurred to me when we're talking about cleaning up the environment and getting plastic out of the environment and back into the economy. And it just made me wonder how many more examples there are like that across the world.
Well, and the thing that resonated with me is the story could have been about anyone in any community. It could be in downtown Baltimore, it could be in Cambodia where it was, it could be in any part of the world. And it was just such a beautiful story and really did a great job of tying together how to address this issue from an individual perspective and then a community perspective and then really growing that out. And I think that gets at that unique background that Doug has coming from both an environmental and a business knowledge perspective.
Yeah. And I'm curious, Stu, in all the work you're doing around the global agreement and all the international work you do, I mean, what do you take away from that? How do you go about this community by community?
I think one of the challenges is this is such an enormous problem, and it can be and needs to be solved at the community level. But what can we be doing at the global level to really accelerate that action? And so, how can we be supportive of efforts that Doug is leading through the Ocean Recovery Alliance and efforts that others are leading through similar partnerships? And I think that's going to be the challenge in this larger global plastics agreement negotiation that governments are undertaking is how do they take action at the international level and translate it all the way through national governments, state and local governments, and then down to communities and down to that monk in Cambodia, where we can be replicating that model everywhere and really scaling up solutions quickly.
So do you start at the international level, or do you start at the local level?
I think we have to start at both. And that's, I think that's what Doug is showing us. Doug is showing us that there's action happening at the local level, there's action happening at the global level, and we've got to find ways to connect that so that we can then move forward more quickly as a global community.
Well, maybe you can tell we're both really looking forward to sharing this episode with you. Please leave us a rating and review, and also let us know, are there any topics you'd like us to bring up on the show? We look forward to Sustainably Speaking soon.